Welcome to AV, Augmenting the Virtual. My name is Ajay. I'm going to start over.
Cool.
Welcome to AV, Augmenting the Virtual. My name is Ajay Kurian. This is a series I started for artists who have shows up right now that nobody can see in person. So that means that almost everything that comes up in this video is stuff that you can access yourself. The only difference is that you don't have the artist to give you a special walkthrough. So today we have Sebastian Black with us. Sebastian is an artist living in Brooklyn. He largely makes paintings, but has made sculptures, clothing, and furniture as well. He's designed books and has run the gallery Melrose Place on and off from his studio for the last 8 years. Sebastian's also a very good friend of mine and someone I've had many conversations with, and I'm really glad he can be the first guest for this project. So thank you, Sebastian.
Thanks for having me.
How's it
What
going?
a pleasure. Pretty good. Yeah, everything's fine. I mean, considering the circumstances.
Yeah. Where are you right now?
I'm in Santa Monica right now at my wife India's dad's place. It's lovely out right now.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
It's like just wet and kind of cold here. I'm in my parents' place in Baltimore in their basement.
How's the basement dwelling?
The basement is all right. I think in some ways it's the best part of the house. Like it has everything that I could ever want. So that's nice. But I just can't see my parents. So hopefully I can integrate back into life soon enough.
Yeah.
So you have a show up right now called Local Warming. And it opened March 4th and was supposed to go to April 18th. I'm not sure if that's changed. But I just wanted to start with maybe going through the press release, and I can scroll through images while you read your press release.
Sure. All right, I'll go ahead. Most mornings, I wake up first. I put on the radio, feed the cats, make coffee, and then maybe, because we live in a studio, get right back into bed. Sometimes after they eat, the cats come and sit with me and India while we sip our drinks and stare at our phones. The cats look at us, or they doze, and we flick at one or another of the never-ending spools of thread which seem to rewind themselves in our inattention. Eventually, I get back up and start the day in earnest. The girl cat follows me around crying until I play with her with this piece of neon ribbon left over from I don't know where. The boy cat rarely moves from the nest of duvet India makes for him on her lap. I bought a thermal camera that attaches to my phone to take pictures of the girl cat while she bugs me, and some of these paintings are based on those photos. Eventually I take a shower, and sometimes India comes and sits and talks to me about this and that. Sometimes we talk about ideas for something one of us is working on, and sometimes we just talk nonsense. Usually one of the cats waits just outside the bathroom door. Afterwards we ride the steam back into a world which has grown colder by 10 degrees. I get dressed quickly, and India is at her desk in front of the computer. In the meantime, the spools have wound themselves up again, and outside, there's the weather.
Cool.
Yep.
Thanks for reading that.
Yeah, no sweat. It's good to read out loud and see little things where you're like, maybe I didn't need to put that word there.
I could almost hear it in the way that you were pausing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I normally, when I'm writing, read things out loud anyway. I think probably most people do, because for me at least, I can hear mistakes better than I can see them in a weird way. You know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a rhythmic thing. You hear it, and all of a sudden you stop on a syllable where you didn't realize that that's where you would be stopping.
Right.
So the first thing that I immediately found myself drawn to were the titles. I had looked them up because one of them in particular kind of stood out to me. I can't remember which one. I think
maybe
it was
at the Disco, or
it was the very last one. No, it was Winter's Waltz. And I was like, man, I wonder, because Sebastian has very often, like, you'll have these very layered references, and maybe it'll be like some Eastern European novel or something. And I was like, oh, this is going to be some deep reference, and I'm going to have to look up some modernist writer. When I did, it turned out that they were just taken from the Frozen soundtracks.
Yes, they're all from I'm so glad you looked them up. They're all from the Frozen soundtrack. Yeah.
Can you talk about
yeah.
that choice?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny because some of these ones like seem like you were saying. I mean, this sounds like it could be like from Street of Crocodiles or one of these kind of some weird obscure Polish book or something. I mean, maybe not so much. Do you want to build a snowman? And I think maybe there's a Let It Go one too. There was a few. It was not my idea actually to name them after the songs from Frozen. It was my friend Sandy's idea. We were sitting around. I had almost finished making all the paintings for the show, and I think we talked a little bit about this, but it was a process where with making these paintings where I was kind of didn't really know what they were about as I was working on them, and so titling became. It was like I had an inkling what this was about, and I think I spoke to you even at some point and said like, oh, I think maybe I'm making a show about global warming, or like it was one of these things. So in this case, it made sense to kind of like it's like I had a feeling that this when Sandy told me, why don't you use the titles from Frozen, it felt right, but there wasn't necessarily like a direct one-to-one correlation between each painting and each title that I chose. Some of them I let the registrar at the gallery just, I said, here's all the songs from Frozen. Do you think this one's good? So Susanna did put Winter's Waltz on that one, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those, they work, it's like sometimes they work when you just throw things together.
Right. But how would you say that the paintings themselves kind of came about? I had made one of these paintings like 2 years ago, and I had written Top on the top, which is with this other series of paintings that I make, which is kind of like a sort of like receptacle for ideas that I don't know what to do with. Like if I have, I want to make this weird painting of a thermal image of a cat, I can fit it into this other series called Top Paintings, where the one coherent thread is that I just write Top on the top. So I have this kind of like bin of ideas that I'm not sort of sure what to do with, So then I was just sitting in my studio for a while. How did that start? Like, how did you begin a practice of making provisional paintings that were made unprovisional by the word top?
That's interesting. That's a good way of putting it. I can't remember exactly when it started, but when I was in grad school, I was like, I didn't go to art school, so I was like, I felt like I was playing catch up in a lot of things, like learning about just different artists, and I mean, like I was mostly looking at painting, but
you didn't go to like art school for undergrad?
For undergrad, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I went to art school for grad school. So I was like playing catch up in this weird way, and being like, I want to make work like this, and then next week, like, oh, actually, I want to make work like, and I never quite felt. And I don't know, and it's also maybe one of these other conditions, but just like there was an access to so many different like styles or something, and. So the Top thing came about because I would be like, I don't know, I kind of want to make a painting that looks like a Rich Aldrich painting, because and then, but I'd be like, well, I can't just do that, and then, or, for whatever reason, not the least amongst the reasons being that like he already exists,
and he's working now.
And he's like there, yeah, and like we have friends, I know the guy, but so I would do the Top thing to just be like, maybe I can like, not like get it out of my system, but just be like, could this be something? You know what I mean? And when I made the cat one, it was so different than the work I was making at the time, that I was like, I like this and it's interesting, but I can't figure out how to make it fit or make sense with what I'm doing right now. So it was kind of like a way to just like kind of put it on ice,
But then you decided to come back to it.
Yeah, and then I had done another, I had like finished 2 shows and was like, just wanted to do something new, and it was there, and I had put it up. I think I had been like slowly, like in retrospect, like kind of like bringing, like almost literally in my studio, bringing it closer to the walls where I work, like it had sort of creeped from like the storage rack to overhanging over the flat, or no, to like resting on the flat file, to hanging on the wall over the flat file, you know. And then maybe some people saw it at like a Melrose Place show and were like, oh, that's cool, what's that, you know. And I was like, okay, that's people, you know, people seem interested in that.
Interesting.
And then it moved a little over, you know, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this.
But that was still kind of based in visual interest. It wasn't, you didn't set out to make a show on global warming. No,
definitely not. I would never do something like that. No, that, I mean, with this show, I still, was not, like I was saying, I wasn't quite, and I'm still, you can hear, probably not totally sure what the implications of the work are. Mm-hmm. And so as I was working on it, different things I was reading and listening to would kind of like sort of drift into the content of the painting for me, you know, and then kind of some, you know, leave a bit of residue sometimes things would drift away. You know, I listened to a whole other book on tape when I was like about halfway through the show about like global inequality and the IMF, and I had a week where I was like, that's what these paintings are about, you know. I was like, and luckily I, you know, moved past that, but I mean, I think one thing that's in the press release, not directly, but the thing that I think I can say that I am kind of like interested in with it was this like this uncanny feeling of like where the general meets the specific, or like where the local meets the global, you know. So like that feeling of being at home, and sort of feeling responsible, but at the same time feeling connected, but at the same time feeling guilty for forces, you know, and just affected by forces that are, you know, beyond your control somehow.
Totally.
It
makes me, I mean, it's kind of a nice segue, because this particular painting, All Is Found, Lullaby Ending, this one and the one above it, Let It Go,
right,
they both feel like they're extreme close-ups of like a weather pattern. And so like the microscopic and the macroscopic feel really wonderfully married in these particular paintings, and kind of become a way to read the other paintings as having that conversation as well, where it's just a cat in most of the cases, whereas it starts to speak about these larger things, or it kind of puts you in this atmosphere where you start to think about those things, and that unease starts to come through.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think those two especially, are kind of like little like keys or something in the atlas of the show or something. Yeah, especially the one below, that one to me reads most like, because it also has a kind of like like a germ or something, or like a cell kind of vibe too. And those are kind of things that I just, like, as I was making the paintings, was sort of noticing, you know.
There's in many of the paintings that I think, just because of the thermal camera, there's this sense of, you know, viral infection. There's this sense of something coming, or something that's like, you know, about to happen, where I think because we've just been so ingrained with seeing weather patterns moving across fields of color, now when I see a painting like this, it also has that same ominous sensibility to it.
Right, for sure. Yeah, it's like what you are bringing to it or something.
And like that imaging technology also it changes the way that it changes our emotional register.
It's funny because I wasn't thinking too much about, like, and I mean, in the text, it's like I talk about this sort of like the omnipresence of like bad news and like your phone and stuff, and I wasn't thinking too much actually about surveillance or imaging technologies, but my interest in that was more like was sort of more selfish. It was more like a process-based interest at first. I was kind of just like, oh, how can I create a set of conditions for myself where I don't have to like make color choices. You know what I mean? Like, it was almost as simple as that, you know. But obviously that stuff is all there then too, you know.
It's kind of in keeping with a lot of your previous work in the sense that I think a lot of times you set up systems for paintings to happen.
Yeah.
But I think the relationship is different. In fact, I think there's like a big jump in some ways between prior bodies of work and the one that you're currently showing. So for one, there's like a huge pivot. You used to make puppy paintings and now these are all cat paintings. Right. So like this is a particularly beautiful puppy painting in my mind. But that was also like a system for making kind of loosely figurative, somewhat abstract paintings where the puppy became like a format or a motif to do those things without necessarily having to make quote unquote subjective decisions.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and to leave just to try to find the right amount of room for them, you know. These so far, I mean, I'm very like in a very early stage with these new paintings, but there's way less decision making. I mean, or the decision making that does take place is like feels more oriented towards a specific goal that I know at the outset, as opposed to with a painting like this where the goal is pretty vague. It's like, you know, like the format is pretty loose. It's like, you know, I know there's going to be something like on both sides, like an ear. I know I want it to fill the whole canvas because I want to kind of like have this sense that the rectangle is like constraining the forms, you know, so that the painting kind of like addresses its own conditions of visibility or something. And yeah, whereas with the other ones, it's really like I'm just trying to like. It's funny. It's like I feel, yeah, because they're in a way I haven't really been like a straight figurative painter ever before, but I'm just trying to make it like look good. You know, that's what, you know. And there's not like when is it done? I'm like, it's done when I like fill it all in and like it's right. And you know.
I mean, you've never really been like a straight painter either.
Right.
It
I mean,
seems like you've always come at it at an angle.
Right, and these are both like kind of like the cat now is like a figure. It's not so much a figure in a painting. It's like it produces like a painting. Sounds annoying, but like as a figure. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like making. It's making the painting like the theme of a painting or something, which is why like when I first thought like, oh my god, I'm switching from puppies to cats, I was like, it's too stupid. And then I was like, actually, no, that's perfect too, because now I'm thematizing the act of like switching too by making it so explicit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the act of like a new body of work like becomes. I mean, either you think I'm actually sincerely like a moron, or like it communicates that like this is like a self-conscious thing to do. You know, at least one hopes.
So there's a to me, there's a sense in your work of using these kinds of motifs as ways to start a painting, as a way to generate like literally just a beginning. Yeah. And I would say that would be the generous read, and like the more cynical read, if I were to give one, would be, this isn't like the gotcha moment or anything.
Yeah, this is, and my screen is just going to disappear.
The more cynical read to me would be that it's a way to deflect, and I'm kind of curious how you think about your use of irony in prior bodies of work as opposed to now. Yeah.
I mean, I think these are like some of the least ironic paintings I've made, really. When I initially was like started working on this show, I mean, it's so strange to like click on like something like that and be like, there's some irony in that painting. He's like, what is that? It's a painting of circles, and yet somehow there is.
For my, not to cut you off, but from my end, like when I see these paintings, and when I see like, you know, yeah, like, okay, let's take this painting for instance.
Mm-hmm.
One, it's like so caught up in modernism. It's so caught
Mm-hmm.
up in the way that a modernist painting looks and appears, and
Sure.
you know, flattening the image and all of these things that we kind of know as the archetypical tropes of modernism.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, for one, you have a title that is, you know, several sentences long. I believe that when
Mm-hmm.
civilization comes to an end and Mother Earth head finally shaves this, like, you know, it's, that title is too long for me to think that this is just a clear read of inserting yourself into the grand pantheon of modernism.
Right.
Sorry, we lost
Uh,
Sebastian for a second, and he's back, and we were talking about modernism and.
Oh no.
But you were just about to start talking about this painting and its relationship to, like, you were saying that if it were trying to be a modernist painting, it would just be like Yellow Riff number 6.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't really like, the more I think about these things, like the less certain my mind is made up about them, because when I first started making this series of paintings, I was really interested in making them like paintings that were like if they, I guess ironic, I don't know necessarily ironic, but they were definitely like engaged in like wanting to be a certain kind of like cheesy modernist painting, a knowing cheesy modernist painting. And then like at some point I lost the thread and I just got more interested in the act, like I sort of got absorbed by the actual questions of like how to resolve the painting,
Yeah.
So I started changing the scale of the paintings, and it was a lot, I found that like a bigger painting was like harder to make. It was harder to get away with that kind of thing on a larger scale for me, at least. And I started being like, whoa, actually, I started just wanting to make them look like good paintings, like formally resolve things.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden I was just thinking more about like color and stuff. There was definitely a piece of, I think through the titling and through some other gestures that I kind of like deployed in dealing with them, like the way the titles were applied to them. I was still sort of reserving a little piece of myself that was like, I know what I'm up to here is like not okay, or something,
Right. I mean, these are called like period pieces, right?
Right. So there was like there was always these kind of like linguistic games that caused the meaning of the work to kind of like sort of like fold back over on itself or something,
Mm-hmm.
So these are called like period pieces, and like they're constructed out of periods, and then they refer obviously to a period of time, and it was a way, like we were saying, of like making, and I think in the press release for this too, of sort of making characters of all these things as if they were like as if like they were characters of paintings in a narrative about art history, as opposed to just being paintings there, right? So there was like this layer of remove.
Right.
With the new work, it's less clear, and I think that's like what initially why I've kind of struggled to talk about the titling and to come up with the titles too, because there wasn't really I sort of let that aspect, those like parentheses or quotation marks or whatever, kind of go, kind of fade to the background, and I got more interested just in making them. And they're like paintings of my cats that I love, and like my wife that I love, and like us at home,
Right.
and like anxiety about proximity, and there is a level of sincerity, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the balance, it strikes a really different balance here where, you found like a way for color choices to kind of be made ready-made, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, you're framing these images and you're selecting very kind of intimate pictures of, these are almost pictures that you would see on someone's personal Instagram account or something, where it's just like a cute picture of their cat, or like a cuddly picture of their significant other with their cat, and with this like filter basically on top of it, it becomes really threatening, and kind of it starts to speak to something much larger.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess like the the one space that you could think of as reading as like undercutting it then would be like maybe the Frozen titles or something. But I don't know. For me, it was like I don't know. There's something just like I love about them too. You know.
It's funny. I mean, it's worth talking like how you use humor in your work.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I will say about this, with the Frozen titles was like that song. I saw Frozen on a plane once, so it's like I did see it once. I never saw Frozen 2, but like when it came out was like the same year that there was this article like being passed around. I think I mentioned it to you. Called like Learning to Die and the Anthropocene or something, and Roy Scranton, I think his name. Yeah, and I just thought that was so weird that it was like the same. There was some kind of like vibe in Frozen that felt like that, and I was just imagining like singing like all these kids like singing Let It Go, and it was just like everyone just being like, oh yeah, we had a good run, you know what I mean? Like like let's just like, you know, like let's just meet the end of the world, like, you know. So there was something. So I just bring that up to say, like, for me, like my interest in Frozen was less about like undercutting the sincerity of the work, and was more like that there was something like supremely fucked up and weird to me about Frozen, you know, in these times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that this has been like a profound shift in the way that you think about language and image in your work?
It's definitely, it feels like more of a shift in how I think about content. Just like I'm always been like very suspicious of work that is like, has a clear point of address and is like about something, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And maybe that's why, maybe it's like I do actually know what these paintings are about, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, I don't know what they're about. Because I'm still like trying to kind of like sort out how I feel about that. But yeah, they're definitely less interested. I think they have less to do with language, and like less to do with puns and jokes and a kind of work that, you know, like when I was in grad school, I was like really into, well, I mean, like not even grad, you know, when I was like in college, I loved like Duchamp and like Brutares and like these kind of like, unfortunately, people the language they were speaking was French, so I had to like translate things before I could even get the stupid joke, you know. But that kind of way of working, you know what I mean? That was like about playing games, you know what I mean, with your audience that could be completed by them. And yeah, these seem to me to just be a total departure from that. Which is why I felt like I had to borrow titles from somewhere else, you know what I mean? I couldn't think of like a way to write them myself, really, you know?
Right. Yeah, it might even verge to sentimentalism if you started writing out titles
yeah,
like
exactly. That. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get that. I get that sometimes you need a bit of remove in order to make the thing itself actually still stand on its own 2 feet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to ask, you know, since obviously no one's going, like, people can't see these in person, these paintings, like, they look pixelated. Like, it's really hard to see how they feel. Could you tell me more about how you made them?
Yeah, for sure. I know, I was just thinking, I wonder if you can, like, but I don't think you can't, like, click and zoom in on it, can you? It'll just, like, I think the image will just pixelate it. Yeah.
These aren't tips.
So, I mean, basically, they're just, like, I take the photos. I bought this little camera that attaches to the bottom of my phone. I make, like, you know, hundreds of photos, and then I whittle them down. I choose ones. And then of those ones, it's like, you know, I project it onto a canvas, I trace it out, and then it's an oil painting. It's not airbrush or anything. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they look better. I mean, I like they actually have a lot of, like, you know, gunky paint in them. I think the one that is like sort of like the sort of
goopiest.
Goopiest. Yeah, I was like, what's the word? Is one of those. Is this one? Like in here, you can't tell, but in here there's like all this kind of like almost like in my mind I was like, oh yeah, this is like a monk painting, you know. I was like which is funny, you just can't help yourself.
That's what I was gonna ask. So is it about making a tension between the image and the paint, or is it just pleasure?
Well, I think like when I did this last show at Clearing here, like I started thinking like, damn, like I've like painted myself into this weird space where like I can't even like blend colors anymore. Like everything is like inside its own line. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And so I got interested partially in this because I did think, not because I was interested in like a tension between the source image and like the idea of a screen and paint, but more just being like, oh, if I paint from a source image, maybe I could paint in a different way. You know what I mean? Like, because there's no like hard edges between these colors, you know. Mm-hmm. So at least I can like, it was literally that, like I can mix things like on the surface of the canvas, you know. Because I felt like somehow I had like gotten to this place where I couldn't do that anymore.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I do remember that, funnily enough, like being one of the things I was excited about. So yeah, there was that, and they do have they have a lot of sort of like goofy paint on there.
So as we start winding this up, I wanted to ask you two like more general questions. Like you've been making art for, at least 10 years now. And I guess I'm curious, what do you think about being an artist? Like, how do I phrase this? What did you think about being an artist 10 years ago, and how does it differ from the way you think about being an artist now?
Oh, that's interesting. Probably if I thought about that more often, I would be like a more like mentally healthy person. And like, what's funny is like I went to school in New York. So, and like I went to like a little private school, like there was like lots of artist kids there. So like I also have this weird version of like what I thought about being an artist, like when I was like 10, you know?
Uh-huh.
And it was like, but it was like a private school, so it was like fancy, you know? I was like, oh, like, you have a big loft, you know what I mean? And like you have like a great place and like da da da. And then for a long time I was like, oh, that was wrong. And it still turns out to have been wrong. I don't know, 10 years ago, I guess, if I, like, it's almost that question of, like, if you could go back in time and, like, tell yourself, like, what is,
Yeah, almost.
I'm not sure, but actually I have one other anecdote, but I'll keep it, like, which is that when I was working for an artist one time, I saw, and this person was, like, it was like my first contact with like the New York art world. It was like right out of college, and this person to me was like had a studio with assistants and was also really nice. But I was like, this person is it. You know what I mean? This is like what you spend your whole life like trying to do. You know?
Right.
And then one time I was like cleaning up their desk, and I saw like a kind of like handwritten note to themselves of like, not affirmations, but like kind of like, I deserve this, I want that, like a list of goals, basically. And I had this like thought where I was like, holy shit, like it never ends, you know what I mean? Like this kind of like thing, this problem of like ambition or whatever, is never ending, because like this guy, it was, in one way it was comforting, and in another way it was like, damn, I don't know, like maybe I should open a bookshop, or something.
I totally get that.
And I think a lot of people that I talk to who are artists are like, everyone has this like one, and I think it's connected also to what, it's connected to other things like, but everyone that I know who's an artist like has a little piece of themselves that like fantasizes about like not being an artist, and being able to clock out, do you know what I mean? And like be like, what if I was like, worked in the city government?
Right.
My weekends were weekends,
Yeah, and not just like an obsessive compulsive person where you can never shut off and...
Yeah, and you just can't shut it off, and you're waking up with like ideas and writing them down, and then,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think was like 10 years ago, that was probably 10 years ago when I saw that note, and I guess, had the doomsday. I could see what was coming down the pipe for me.
You
And I was
realize
right,
that there's no arrival.
There's no arrival and there's no escape.
Yeah, kind of like the world that your paintings are foreboding.
Yes, sure, exactly.
My last question is, have you ever had a transcendent experience with an artwork?
I don't know about transcendent. I always feel like...
I was pretty sure you were going to bristle just at that word alone.
Yeah. I was going to just say, I feel like the most like profound experiences I've had with artworks put me back in my body more than they take me out of it, you know. I mean, I'm a sap, so like here's a tip. If you're hungover, it's a good time to go. If you're hungover, kids, that's a good time to go to the Met or to an art museum for me and look at paintings, because I'm like porous, you know what I mean? I'm ready for beauty, and I'm like gonna cry. Actually, like I'll go to the Met and cry.
That's a good tip.
So I've had a lot of experiences like that, you know. But yeah, none transcendent, but definitely a lot of paintings have moved me. A lot of movies have moved me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, a movie would be great. We're all watching movies right now. So is there a movie that comes to mind quickly?
Oh, yeah. Of course, I'll be like, wait, what's the title of it? There's actually, I mean, this is so lame, but there's this Lars von Trier, I think it's called is it Breaking the Waves? It's the one where she is like in Scotland and she's talking to God. It's not the one with Björk.
Breaking the Waves.
It's like, it's got like Stellan Skarsgård and... Yes, this is it. This fucking movie fucks my shit up.
Okay.
And Transcendent is good because she's like talking to God the whole time. I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but at the end, the last shot of the movie, I was like...
Destroyed.
Like, it just blew my mind. No, it was just like, I cannot believe anyone would have made that choice. It's so good.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's just like really like, yeah, so...
That's amazing. Okay, I'm gonna watch this today.
Yeah. It's a great movie.
Okay. Cool. So to finish all these, I want to have a poem or reading that I select for that artist in particular. And so this is the poem that I have selected for you, which is Mountains Covered with Cats by Wallace Stevens. And I've read this a few times now, and I think in a way, besides like the cat reference, I think it reminds me of an earlier version of you.
Oh, cool.
Mountains covered with cats. The sea full of fishes and shoals, the woods that let one seed alone grow wild, the railway stops in Russia at which the same statue of Stalin greets the same railway passenger, the ancient tree in the center of its cones, the resplendent flights of red facsimiles through related trees, white houses and villages, black communicants, the catalog is too commodious. Regard the invalid personality instead, outcast, without the will to power, and impotent, like the imagination seeking to propagate the imagination, or like war's miracle begetting that of peace. Freud's eye was the microscope of potency. By fortune, his gray ghost may meditate the spirits of all the impotent dead, seen clear, and quickly understand, without their flesh, how truly they had not been what they were.
Ajay, what a lyrical way of telling me that I'm impotent.
It's what I've always wanted to say.
Yes, yeah, exactly. No, that's beautiful.
Thanks a lot for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, man. Thank you so much. I'm glad you asked me.
Yeah, hopefully we can see each other soon in person.
Yeah, for sure. All right, take it easy.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.